They are the fabulous learning nerds. Cause if you're tired of the old ways of getting it done, you've got the fabulous learning nerds. Scott, Dan, and Abby are making it fun. The best ideas that you've ever heard. So everybody spread the word. They're gonna keep your wheels turning. The fabulous learning nerds. Fabulous learning nerds. Oh yeah!
Hey everybody, happy holidays and welcome to another fantastic episode of your Fabulous Learning Nerds. I'm your host, Scott Judy, and with us, my co-host, you love him, Dan Coonrod.
Dan the man. Oh yeah.
Mr. Coonrod.
Mr. Scott. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How was your holiday?
My holiday was good. It was good. It was very busy.
Uh-huh.
I feel like that's just kind of like my life in general. It's good but busy. But my holiday continued that trend. It was fantastic. How was yours?
Mine was
fair to middling.
No patience.
I stole it. I stole it from you.
You did.
That's the thing. I did. My holiday was all right. It was nice. It was quiet. I need some quiet. I need more quiet. That's for sure. But that's just the thing. The thing that I will say about the holidays and just with me, like it's supposed to be a peaceful and restful time, and all too often it is not. Like, you know what I'm saying? Oh, it's great. Let's come on. There's a lot of pressure to have a good time at the holidays.
I totally agree.
Don't
I was
you
being
think?
sarcastic. Yeah, I'll tell you, I, for the most part, don't do holidays. Like, man, I feel like such a Grinch saying that out loud, but like my daughter is like, teenager now, and my wife and I, we've talked about it. We've all talked about it as a family, and it's like, what if we just like got each other gifts when we felt like it, and just like we're good to each other all the time, and we could just call that our holiday, because like the stress and obligation of like Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's and all of these other holidays, it's just not worth it.
No.
Now I feel like a villain. I've said that out loud. Here it is.
No, you're not a villain by any means. That's totally okay. I do have my holiday lights up. They've been up since Halloween. Put them up right away. So we have that going on. Spreading a little cheer in my neighborhood that desperately needs a little bit of cheer.
I will say, as a family, we do have one holiday tradition, and that is our Halloween tree, which is a small little Christmas tree, like maybe 2-3 foot tall. And we found it and it was on sale because it was all black. And I was like, we have to get this. And so we put Halloween lights on it and little spooky ghoulies. And then that stays up until Christmas. So people come over to visit and they'll be like, oh, you've already got your Christmas lights up. Like, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Merry Christmas. In my heart of hearts, yes.
That is my envy for your Halloween tree. That has not
I'll
passed
take a
the
picture of it. It's little, but it's powerful.
No, it's awesome. Hey, so Dan, we are super excited today. We have a very, very special guest with us, and we're going to hear all about her and maybe about her holiday in a little segment that we call "What's Your Deal?"
Hey man, what's your deal?
Kellie,
Hey.
what's your deal, my friend?
Hey. Well, I'm here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, recovering from my holiday. I'm a OD L&D specialist out here in Albuquerque.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So tell us a little bit about how you became an OD specialist out in New Mexico. What's your journey like?
Yeah. So I actually started in the learning and development industry really back in 2016 in the real estate field. I was working in the real estate field, and believe it or not, despite what you see on TV, it's actually a really hard or really emotionally taxing job. And I just kind of had enough of the crazy of all of that and decided to start training in that field. And so that's what I did, and started to kind of dive into some classes and learning myself. And then kind of moved through the ranks in different capacities in that industry, and went back to school to get formally trained in really my background. My degree is organizational and human resource development, but I have heavy training and have studied heavily in the instructional design field, and have worked in that space. Yeah, since 2016. So, and went out and started my own company during the pandemic because I wanted to diversify. I wanted to do other things, and I wanted to learn about other industries. And the funny thing is you learn that everybody has the same problems. So you learn that everyone just puts on a different shirt every day, but pretty much has very similar problems. But the cool thing is I've got to learn about other industries. Like how 911 works, and how people respond to emergencies, and how manufacturing works, and how employment law works, and just through the different jobs that I have done. And so that's cool.
Well, that's fantastic. I agree. Like, I hate to admit it, but I got problems. I don't know about you, Dan, but I got at work. I'm just saying work, that kind of problems. So the fact that everybody's got similar problems is great, and ties really directly into the thing that we're going to be talking about this week, which I'm really excited to jump in. So let's go ahead and jump in with our topic of the week.
Are you ready?
Okay, this week we're talking about training is not a one and done. Well, now our problem is fixed, right, Daniel?
Done. Look at that. What do you mean training's not one and done?
Let's let Kellie talk a little bit about that, right? I love this topic because I swear to God, this is what happens to us in our industry, is that, like, oh my goodness, we have an opportunity. We're going to throw training at it. And then when we're done, we just kind of wipe our hands and walk away until the next opportunity comes without any kind of real thought process in it. Is that your experience, Kellie? Or help us understand this whole idea that training really isn't a one and done.
Yeah. And so training, the funny thing is training is about behavior change. And I don't think, and I guess why would they? Why would somebody who's not in this space think of it in that capacity? But it's funny. I joke with people in the industry and I say, gosh, that's like, oh, that makes me want to put a hot fork in my eye when people are like, training's going to fix all my problems. It's like, do you even need training? Like, what's the problem? Is the problem you? Like, it's a lot of things. And you really, and you guys know this, you have to, it's really like peeling an onion and figuring out, okay, what's the core root of the problem? And it's sometimes not even what you think it is on the surface. And so that's why I like this topic. And I really, when I consult with clients and when I design products, I really try to put an emphasis on things that they can do after the fact to continue that loop, to continue that process, to really change the behavior, because it takes time. I mean, you're forming new habits and you're rewiring your brain essentially. And that's not just something that happens with the snap of a finger.
I've always felt like so many people view training like duct tape. Like we know it shouldn't be a permanent fix, but we wrap something around in duct tape and go, okay, that's temporary. I know I got to come back to it. And then nobody ever does. And then when it breaks, we're like, why did it break? And the cycle like repeats over and over. So I love this topic.
Yeah, no, me too. And it's funny because I consult in an industry where there's a lot of continuing education, and that's what drives me crazy about the continuing education is, well, first of all, this has to be 3 hours. And it's like, well, can they learn it in an hour? Can they learn it in 3 hours? Can they learn it in 6? Like, what do you need? And then the CE is just checking a box. It's not, it's not doing anything to really meet any of the objectives that you're wanting it to meet. It's simply meeting the objective of checking the box. And so, so I always get excited about this topic. Shamefully, I guess. Shamefully or shamelessly?
No,
Not sure.
no, not shamelessly, not at all.
Yeah, I was just having this conversation. I have a new employee, and we were just having this conversation just last week, and this came up. Like, I was like, so what are the two most important things? And for me, it's what's the objective and who's our audience, right?
Yeah.
If I can identify those two things, if I can be an advocate for those two things, and I'd say sometimes we don't know what those two things are, and yet we still move forward, right? And so I think that's really important. This is a really great thing to start off with. So we know what the opportunity is. Like, it's not a one and done. Like, so how do we begin to identify what the real problem is? What are some of the things that you would recommend that we start thinking about when we identify what those objectives are?
So, I think, hypothetically, it always works like this, right? Ring, ring, you get the phone call and they're like, I have a problem. And you're like, great, let's fix it. Because it always happens like that. But, really sitting down, like, I ask a ton of questions. So somebody will come to me and say, my team is putting the widgets in the machine too slowly. And well, I just ask questions. Well, okay, what makes you think that? Why are you saying that? And just asking the why questions. Why? Well, what you think training is going to fix this? Well, what's your goal with training? And also it comes down to sometimes to talking to not just the stakeholder, but talking to the team and saying, okay, we're thinking that this problem might be going on. Like, what's going on with you guys? And hearing from them, well, the machine constantly breaks down, or the machine is on the right side of the building and we have to walk, a quarter mile in bare feet through snow to get to the machine, or whatever that may be. And so it's funny because a lot of this work, and you guys know this too, is like peeling an onion, like a puzzle. A puzzle's a good analogy, because you get the box of 100 pieces and it's thrown on the table and you have to put the puzzle together.
No, I agree with that. I was going to use a Shrek reference, but I like your puzzle reference better.
Training is like onions.
It's like an onions. It's got layers. That's a terrible Shrek impression. So that's great. So I'm going to ask for a friend. So imagine you get to run a world where a lot of times these requests come to you. So you're right. Like, here's my problem. My experience sometimes is people come to us, and this is not a bad thing. So this idea of I'm going to come to a leadership position or authority position and say, I have a problem and here's how I think we should solve it, is not necessarily bad. Unless you're in learning and development, because I can tell you, like, 90% of the time when people come to me and my team and say, hey, I have a problem, here's how we want to solve it, not a lot of thought process has gone into that solve. Like 90% of the time, it's like, that's what the other client has asked for because they saw it and they thought it was neat, right? Yeah. What are some strategies you have as a thought leader at the table to say, or don't we? Like, when is it, or how do you push back and say, time out, let's talk about this? Do you really need a 3-hour training, or can we get it to something else? What are some tactics that we could use to exercise better thought leadership in that moment?
Yeah, so I think asking, sometimes putting it back on them, and I don't mean that in like a harsh way, but saying, well, what does this look like to you? Okay, well, why would you tell me why you think that would be effective? I think having those conversations, I think being able to have those conversations too allows you to build some rapport and build some trust, which I think also can help with these sorts of things. But just continuing to ask questions and really kind of, I like to make it try to make it a collaborative process when, when working with your leadership or executives or, the person that comes to you with a problem and saying, and asking those questions. Well, what does that look like to you? Well, why? So what, tell me why you think that would be effective. And then, maybe you come to them and say, okay, well, what about this? Have you thought about it this way? And really just trying to make it that two-way street, because you have to get their buy-in and doing that. And granted, they hire you because of your expertise and your professionalism, but they don't want to be told, how do I put it? They don't want to be told they're wrong. And so you don't want to put it to them like, no, that's not right. But you want to help guide them. Like, you want to take the steering wheel and just push it a little bit back into the right lane, so to speak. And making that a collaborative process, I think, helps.
So I think this is a terrible idea, and this is why it's probably not the right response that you might want to always give.
Yeah, you know what? I have done that inadvertently because sometimes that knee-jerk reaction comes out, and yeah, that doesn't work so well.
I've found that, like, being internal and being external, there tends to be like a huge difference in how people react to like suggestions. Like,
yeah,
internally, I'd be like, hey, so this is the project and this is what I think we should do. Yeah, nope, we can't do that. It has to be 15 minutes and it has to be, this style of e-learning. And you just kind of go like, well, like, how did we get there? We got there because that's the need. That's what has to happen. And you go, oh, okay, then we'll figure it out. But like, I've had opportunities to consult and be external where I've been like, hey, this is what I think. This is what I think you should do. This is how I think you should roll it out. And they go, oh, wow. Yeah, okay. Super insightful. Yeah, we're definitely going to do that. And I'm just like, like, what's the difference? Like, I don't know if you have like any insight there between like that internal and like external, like that consultant versus, ID manager, training manager internally in a company.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just, I think it just comes down to sometimes looking, like, we look at things through different sets of glasses, and we all have blind spots by nature. It just happens. Like, when you do something, and I think even telling your stakeholders, you're in the weeds every day. You're in the weeds. You're in this. And so they're not just in it from like a production physical standpoint, but they're in it emotionally. Like, it's kind of become an emotional, they're probably not crying over it necessarily. Maybe they are, I'm not sure. But but it's something that's stinging them because there's a result from that. So when your emotions are in something, invested in something, you look at things differently. And so being able to tell people too, hey, I'm here to see things through a different set of eyes, because this is something that's happening to you and happening to your employees, happening to your company. You're seeing this through a different color of glasses than I'm seeing this. And so I think that also helps to be able to drive towards what may actually be needed. And coming back to your example and to what Scott mentioned about knowing your audience too. I mean, that's key. Even asking, okay, well, you think you need a 3-hour e-learning class for everyone? Well, a good example, I'm looking at a project now that is in the construction field. And is that really going to be feasible for people that are out in the field on a machine every day, who barely answer their phone? Yeah, and definitely don't have a computer hooked up to their thing going down the street. So, again, it just comes back to asking those questions. And I think, I think having a little bit of compassion and a little bit of empathy too for what they're going through, because it's an emotional thing for them.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is really important, you mentioned stakeholder buy-in, which is critical, right? And you've just been speaking to something that I think is really important as well, which is this idea of ego. Like sometimes I feel like the biggest disruption for a good partnership, no matter who you are, what you're doing, is ego. We get emotionally invested in what's going on, whether it's myself or somebody else, right? And it doesn't lead to good outcomes, in my humble opinion, when we allow that to continue.
Yeah.
Any suggestions, thoughts on, or even tips and tricks on, how do you manage ego in the room to get better results?
Yeah, that's tough. And it's tough. Yeah, I mean, for me, again, what I have done is I really try to build trust with people, and again, just kind of talking to them, trying to sympathize with their pain points, trying to bring them in again and collaborate. Oh, okay, I see what you mean. Well, tell me a little bit more. Well, what about this? I think sometimes with ego, if you're able to bring them into the process, it helps. Not every time. It's not a perfect science. It's not a science either. It's probably an art, really. But I think having that trust and trying to build relationships is really, for me, in my experience, been the best way to really break down those barriers. And it takes time. And sometimes time is not of the essence, but I think you really have to make time for that, because I think in the end, you have better outcomes.
Yeah, I find that listening a really important skill. Like if you're in this business and you don't know how to listen very well, like get good at it. Get good at listening really well. Second is be aware of your own ego, because I might be the problem, right? So we started this off like Scott's got a lot of problems. I might be the problem, right? So that might be it. And I still love, my favorite question is would it make sense? That's nice. I wonder, would it make sense? But for me, it's such a it allows the person across the table to kind of enter into the discussion versus, putting them on the spot. And it's just been my little trick of the trade. Like, hey, would it make sense if we maybe looked at a 30-second video, but like 10 of them instead of a 30-minute thing that no one's going to watch? Well, I wouldn't add the no one going to watch part of it, right? So anyway, that's my thing. So Dan, do you have any other suggestions?
No, I liked your positioning phrase of what it makes sense. I often find myself going to like, what's our thought process? Because if I know what somebody's thoughts were that got us to this point, it's way easier to be like, oh, well, I know what I think I know what we're trying to accomplish. Are we trying to accomplish this? Yes? Okay. The way we're going at it may not be optimal. We can still go at it if that's the way you'd like. But if we're looking for just like an optimal solution, we may want to try W and T. We may want to try these other variables. I also found, just when getting stakeholder buy-in, getting involved as soon as possible. I think too often as learning and development professionals, we're kind of at the tail end of the whip.
Yeah.
That didn't come out right. That sounds terrible, but we're kind of at the end of the process. Maybe saying that, whip isn't the right one, but we're at the end of the process. And by the time it gets to us, this idea has gone through the hands of 4 or 5 different people. And so what the original goal was is still there, but it's got this other person's pet project wrapped in, and it's got this other person's, idea for what they think would be good already wrapped in. So by the time you get to it, it's, they wanted a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit. And by the time you get done, it's a bacon, egg, and cheese hamburger with a side of onion rings and a sesame seed bun. It's there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I would be in the meeting and some director or VP would be like, we need training and we've got this red flag behavior and we just need to get it. We just need to get that red flag behavior occurrence down. We need to get the percentage down. It's oh, okay, great. Yeah, we can do that. Absolutely. How long do you want the training to be? I mean, obviously as short as possible. Okay, great. Here's a few ideas. Do any of these sing to you? Yeah, I like it. Idea, C. Great. We're going to get started. We're off to the races. We're on it. and the turnaround on those and the collaboration just getting involved easier, like so much better. I would tell stakeholders all the time, the sooner you get my team involved, the better and shorter the training will be.
Yeah.
And that usually got us a seat at the table pretty quick when I promised shorter trainings with better outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I'm with you. I don't like bacon, egg, and cheese hamburgers. So yeah, no, totally. And I mean, and that sings to their, their wallet in some ways. Like shorter training, cool. Yeah, like less cost, cool. I'm down with that.
Most people are down with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to one and dones, right? And something you mentioned at the beginning of a conversation, which is all about this idea of behavior change, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that a one and done will change behavior is kind of silly, in my humble opinion. So how do we get good behavior change? What are some of the things that we should be looking for, should be thinking about when it comes to sustainable behavior change, which is what I really think everybody wants?
Yeah. So, in whatever you're doing, like we've got this training we put together for our team to help improve widget manufacturing or whatever. I mean, I think really building in that loop, so to speak, it's a process, it's a cycle, really. So they're not just going through a training. I mean, yeah, they may go through a training, but I mean, you guys know this, like the active learning aspect, the practice, but also what really happens afterwards. And I think this is why it's important to get stakeholders involved, because I think oftentimes too, they think, and I don't think they think this like, oh, like it's, well, maybe sometimes like it's them, not me, but it's a process for everyone. So even as, a manager, you have to get the stakeholder buy-in, but you have to get your manager and your team buy-in too, because it's for everyone. You have a team of people who may be going through the training, but the manager's going to have a role in that. They're going to be practicing in the training, but what are they going to be doing afterwards? How are we going to be implementing what we've learned afterwards? And how are we setting it up so that the manager can help assess that and help perfect those skills, at 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months afterwards. So how are we helping set up, not that's just this training that people are going to go through, but how are we helping to set up our middle managers, our executives for success? So what are measurements? What are things that they should be doing? And what are things that they should also be looking for to help foster this change, to help move people in that direction?
Yeah, really important. What's going to be new, better, or different when we're done?
Right.
And how do we recognize that? So my team does a lot of sales training, so that's kind of easy, right? So we can go, oh, well, sales went up. So we can take a share of that. Like, we'll never be able to take 100% of it, right? But we could take a piece of that, right? But when it comes to like, some of the softer stuff, that can get kind of tricky, right?
Sure.
So is that a matter of, how do I measure other than a once a year survey of, is my boss a good leader? How do I manage those soft skills, change in behavior when it comes to those kind of things? What are some things that we should be thinking about in that regard?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, like when I say building into the training, I mean building into this whole package, and the training is just a component of this package, but building into that whole package, maybe we are tapping into customers a little bit sooner, maybe at the 30-day mark, or maybe we're actually running so to speak, a test with a group of customers, over a period of time, to help gauge how the process, how this particular process has changed. Customer service is a good example. So maybe we're constantly kind of tapping in and taking a test of that soil, so to speak, throughout that process. looking at numbers and metrics. Okay, what were our metrics before versus what are our metrics at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And I think it's important to look at a process over time, because I think you get kind of a better sample of that change over time. So, looking, okay, what are we at 30 days? What are we at 60 days? What are we at 90 days? Or whatever that is. I think there's lots of things that you can do to build into that whole process. And those are just a couple of examples that kind of immediately come to mind.
What's your thought on the importance of, let's say, postmortem reviews after the event kind of things?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you said it all right there. Yeah.
I think those are really like, yeah. That really says it all. I think they're really more a pat on the back for the person that developed this training, because it's rare. Like in my opinion, when you get those, I usually take the top stuff out, the bottom stuff out, and what's in the middle, because it's rare that you get anything that's really useful from that. What's really useful is what happens when you go back to your desk.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I think that that opinion is probably, as the cool kids say, a hot take. I can't tell you how important people are always saying that, like, oh, the postmortem, like, oh, we got to tear this apart. Like, once we finish it up. So to hear you say like, yeah, and don't get me wrong, I agree with you. I think what happens is a lot of time people put off feedback and suggestions until that postmortem meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, it ends up becoming like this, like, well, now that we're here, let's talk about all the ways things could have been better. And I wish people would just say that, like, midstream, like, hey, like, we're working on this, and like, our numbers aren't moving as fast. I hope, can we try A, B, and C now? As opposed to like, well, let's wait till we all wrap up. So I love that opinion. But just like in business land, not going back and doing a postmortem feels like sacrilege. like oh, the holy texts. Ah.
I know, because it's so ingrained in us, I think. But to your point,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a great point, it's an iterative process. And so why are we not dropping in little nuggets in that process to figure out where things need to change versus waiting until the end?
Both great points. I'm in an internal organization that delivers, and my heartburn is like we almost never do them.
Yeah,
and so
that too.
and I've been waving my arms, like, from a learning perspective, like, I just want to learn and get better. And if we don't take the time to talk about, hey, what and you got to talk both sides. Like, I want to know what went really well, and I want to know, like, what would you do differently so we can make better decisions, because oftentimes I feel like we're just reloading the same stuff into the chamber, and it's Einstein. We're going to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results, and we don't get those different results. It's like, So I love this idea of, hey, can we get the feedback in the middle? Can we call an audible and make some changes while we're going through the process? But that review part of it from a learning nerd perspective is like really important to me. But I love where you guys are talking about, like, why do I have to wait 45 days? Like, I'll take that meeting of 45 days versus not having a meeting.
Yep.
That's true. I feel like if you're not having any review whatsoever, you're probably like, oh, postmortem would be great. Wouldn't that be amazing? That's a different and much sadder version I wasn't thinking about.
I mean, that's my thing, right? And so, finding opportunities to do that and making it part of your standing operating platform, I think, is important. Or at least finding some ways to get the feedback that you need, maybe without a meeting. And that, I think, you can be strategic with your stakeholders, right? So, hey, can I schedule regular stakeholder meetings with people just to kind of get a feedback of how we're doing? and make sure I'm touching those key components of my business so that we can, so I can get the real feedback versus this is what I'm going to say in a room of 50 people. And this is what I'm going to say just to you, Scott. Like, and honestly, if my baby's ugly, I need to know. Like, I want to know that my baby's ugly because no one wants an ugly baby. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
No, I was going to say it's funny. You and I come from a very similar place.
Mm-hmm.
Some would say almost exactly the same place.
Some.
And we came about a very similar problem with two different solutions. You're like, hey, I just got to get this postmortem. Like, hey, can we come together? And I was like, hey, I can't wait for that 45-day mark. So I'm just going to go badger my stakeholders. I'm going to go badger like my users. I'm going to go just basically go badger everybody. Hey, give me feedback. Did you like that? Well, it's okay. Oh, so it's okay. So what wasn't good about it? Like, come tell me the baby's ugly. I need to know because I've still got time to save 300 or 400 other learners if you tell me right now. But if you wait until 45 days is done, like we're done. But to your point, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like traditionally, it can be tough to get stakeholders, especially when things are successful, to come back and say, this is what worked, this is what didn't. Like when things don't work, it's super easy. That meeting is going to happen. But when when things do work, like no news is good news, and it's tempting to treat crickets as applause.
Right. I guess the one thing that I would add, and I'd love to get your feedback on this too, Kelly. I mean, like in the world of learning experience platforms, LMS is fantastic, but my opinion on the learning management system all too often is it is a check the box activity, right? So, what's the best way that we can say that people understand stuff? We're going to throw them an e-learning and we're going to check to make sure that they passed. And then I can come back and give you some kind of measurement on it.
Right.
But for me, there's not a lot of, there's no back and forth for the most part. And then the second thing is, did they really retain any of it? Like, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Right. Why do I have to go through the same stuff every year when it comes to compliance, right? Because I forgot it all? No, because I have to do it, right? So LXP, learning experience platforms, at least allow for at least my experience, I'm finding this two-way conversation, 360 communication. So what my team's been doing, to Dan's point, like, do I want to know if this is any good? We're going to drop a survey on them, right? Let's drop a survey and see what kind of feedback we get from my audience that I can go ahead and take back anecdotally. Now, sometimes I got to give a carrot for that, but at least I'm getting something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I love that. You're getting something a little bit more tangible. I think that you can work with, and yeah, I mean, and that's like with anything, there's always whether it be e-learning, virtual live training, whatever you're doing, there's always those benefits and challenges, so to speak. And sometimes it's just about finding which is going to have the most benefits and the least amount of challenges. But I like that because it allows you, to kind of have that whole package, that whole loop, so to speak. Did they retain, in the end, did they retain the knowledge? Have they retained something? Are they able to implement it back on the job? Is it meeting the objectives that we wanted it to meet? And are we having the right outcomes?
That sounds like a summary of success. I mean, that was my next question. Emily. What does success look like to you? Like at the end of the day, right? So we're going to identify an opportunity and we're going to go ahead and what does success really look like to you, Kelly?
Well, in my perfect world, success would be that quote, that knowledge is actually being retained, that people have taken what they've learned back to their jobs and have actually implemented something that's useful to them. Because that's the other thing I try to think about with training too, is I I want people to walk away with something that actually makes their life better, their work life better, whatever it may be. And so I would hope that they're implementing what they've learned to make their life better, that managers have been involved in that process, really creating that whole feedback loop. And then you're able to actually measure, to see that behavior change, to hopefully see that people all the way around are happier, and to see those measurable results, whatever it may be. We've reduced safety issues, or we've increased our revenue, or our customers are happier, or we've increased efficiency because we've been able to do whatever it is. All of those sorts of things in a perfect world.
We're getting ready to kind of like wind some things down, but I wanted to go ahead and give you an opportunity to, is there anything that you're passionate about that you wanted to talk about today that we just didn't have the opportunity to get to yet? Like, some final thoughts for you, Kellie.
Oh gosh. I mean, I'm passionate about a lot of things when it comes to this industry. That really, I think that the training is not one and done, that it's really about behavior change is one of the big things that I'm passionate about. The other thing, which we didn't dive into, which is a whole other subject, and you probably can relate to a lot, Scott, is quantifiable learning objectives, like measurable learning objectives. Like, what are we doing? Cool. You want someone to understand something. That's awesome. But like, how are we going to measure they understand it? Those sorts of things. I mean, I really, honestly, I mean, in general, I'm just passionate about this industry as a whole, because you don't think about it. And I think a lot of people think like learning and development training, like really, like how can that be interesting? But when you really think about the card, or the cog or I don't know if cog's the right word, but the place at the table that we really have the ability to do work that makes people happier, more productive, all the way around at work. And we spend so much time at work, and work itself is changing. That environment is changing. But when you have the ability to make something better for someone, I mean, how could you not be passionate about that? And that sounds so corny, but in reality, I mean, that's what our role is. Our role is to make things better. And if we can make things better for people who are doing the work, if we can make things better for a business owner who's trying to feed their family, contribute to the economy, how could you not support that?
You just reinforced something that I say all the time, and that is learning people are, for the most part, good people. And that's what I love about being in this community. That's what I love about my time with Dan and Abby and folks like you, is that to hang out with really smart, really good people. So that's really awesome. There it is. Thank you, Kellie. Thanks so much for hanging with us today. Hey, could you do me a favor? Could you let our audience know how they can get in touch with you? Maybe some groovy stuff that you're working on. What's going on in your world that they can go look you up and find some more groovy stuff?
Yeah. So, a fun fact about me, I'm a bulldog lover, and I have 3 meatloaf English bulldogs that pretty much run my household. So if you want to learn more about what my company does, and you want to, see, if you want to look at occasional pictures of my dogs too, because I love to look at them. It's probably my bias, but I love them, so I expect everyone else to love them. But you can follow me on social media. You can really, if you just look up the Kellie Tinnin, you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. My company stuff, what we do, my website, kellietinnin.com. And you can find me there. And we're working on some great stuff, actually, Q1 of next year. So a lot of feedback that I had been getting from clients, and that I had just been reading and hearing from people just in kind of the business space in general, is that there's a real need for leadership training, helping to build and foster leadership skills among people that are in the management space for the first time. And interestingly enough, statistically, like people that, they start to get into management roles around 30, but they don't get any training until much, much later, like 10, 12 years later, give or take. And so there's a real gap there. So I am actually working on a leadership skill development for first-time manager program. And I hope to launch that sometime Q1 of next year. And so I'm really excited about that because I'm hoping that it will just help people that are new to that part in their, or to that road in their career, again, build some skills so that they can help foster and, build up other people. And so I'm excited about that.
Fantastic. Building some skills, groovy stuff from Kellie. Go check out her website. All the links that we're going to put in the show notes, so go check that out. Really appreciate you sharing your time. Love that you've got 3 bulldogs. My wife collects Shih Tzus. We have 7. So you've got 4 more to go.
Yeah. People always ask me, well, how many is too many? And I say 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, we're way past that.
You're past the point of no return.
Yeah. No, I'm wondering why I'm still sane. But at any rate, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Daniel-san.
Yes, Scott.
Could you do us a favor and let our audience know how they can connect with us?
Absolutely. All right, party people, if you haven't already, email us at nerds@thelearningnerds.com. Join in on the conversation. Tell us your feelings about how you connect with stakeholders in good and meaningful ways. If you're on Facebook, you can find us at Learning Nerds. On Instagram, Fab Learning Nerds. And lastly, for more information about us, what we do, and any updates, www.thelearningnerds.com. Scott?
Thanks, Dan. Hey, everybody. Could you do me a favor? Could you go ahead and hit that subscribe button? We'd really appreciate it. More importantly, if you like what's going on, like what Kellie had to say, go ahead and share this episode with your friends. If you've got some comments, please leave us a review. Put it in either the iTunes review or Stitcher reviews. Help us get our word out to more people, and that would be great. Until next time, I'm Scott.
I'm Dan.
Hey, and I'm Kellie.
And we're your fabulous learning nerds, and we are out. Hey there, are you a learning and development professional with an expertise our audience would appreciate? Would you like to create a stronger learning community and make this world a little bit better? And would you like to hang out with some groovy learning nerds and share your story? If so, consider being a guest on our show. It's easy. Just send an email to nerds@thelearningnerds.com with guest in the subject line. Dan will surely return your email and get something set up. Well, that's when he's finished watching Netflix, that is. But seriously, we'd love to hear from you as well. So send your email to nerds@thelearningnerds.com today.